Alright, so remember in the previous video I talked about the neutral wire, the earth wire, and I ended on the earth wire. I said that it actually connects the appliance's metal casing to the ground, thereby providing a safe path, for electricity in case of a fault or a short circuit, and this helps to prevent electric shock, to the user. So each time if this is an appliance, then the earth wire will be connected to the casing of this appliance to the ground, and that will help to prevent electric shock in case the live wire touches the casing. So let's conclude with a component in that 3-pin plug as we were discussing the fuse. What does the fuse do? Well, we can say a fuse, this is a thin, I can say this is a thin piece, of wire, which overheats and melts if the current is too high. So if the current that wants to go to the electrical appliance is too high, it simply means that the fuse is going to overheat and actually melt, and actually this helps to break the circuit. And once it breaks the circuit, it simply means that it prevents maybe the cable catching fire. And mostly, sometimes instead of using fuses, some electrical appliances are using what they call circuit breakers. So in the home, if there's a fault, you just see a circuit breaker fall. So that's the idea that is going to be there. So the circuit symbol, you need to remember the circuit symbol. The circuit symbol that we use for a fuse is this one here. So this is the circuit symbol that we use for a fuse. So the moment you see this is a circuit symbol for what we are calling as being a fuse. But in normal cases, when we talk about a fuse, inside of it has got what we simply call as being a nichrome wire. So it has got a nichrome wire. So it is that nichrome wire that overheats and melts when a high current passes through. Thereby, fuses help to prevent damage to the electrical appliance. But in most cases, they are going to be asking you questions how to find the rating in an electrical appliance. Let's try to show you a few sample questions on how you can find the fuse rating, what type of a fuse needs to be fitted in a particular electrical appliance. With me, I have a few sample questions that will just help you so that we put you on the road to answering these questions. These questions are coming from ECZ, Examination Council of Zambia questions, so you do well to actually look at them. The first one there says that an electric kettle is rated. So according to that one, it is rated 230 volts, 3000, that should be watt. That should be watt. So it is rated 230 volts, 3000 watt. And the question says, what is the suitable fuse to use in this appliance? And they have given you options there. So what you're going to do is that when they give you a fuse rating, each time you need to find the current passing, in that appliance. So they have given us the voltage, which is 230, volts. They have also given us the power, which is equal to a 3000 watt. So your job is simply to find how much current is able to pass through this electrical appliance. So when you know the current that is able to pass through this appliance, it will help you know the right fuse that you can use. So for example, remember that power is equal to voltage times current. Therefore, if you want, you can be using the triangle formula there, where we can say power, voltage, and current. So if I want to find current, it simply means current is equal to power divided by voltage. So the current will be, what's the power? It's 3000 watts. Remember, it's supposed to be in watts, divided by the voltage, which is 230 volts. So if you divide 3000 divided by 230, that is simply going to give us a 13 to a whole number that is 13 amps. That's the current that is passing through this electric kettle. Now, if the current passing through this electric kettle is 13, remember, you do not even have 13. Actually, you cannot, the fuse rating should be higher than the normal operating current, slightly higher than the normal operating current. Therefore, if the current passing through the electric kettle is 13 amps, then the best fuse that you can use is something that is slightly higher than 13 amps, but again, not too high. Otherwise, you risk damaging your appliance. So the best option there is simply 15. We can simply use a 15 amps. That's the best, for this appliance. Remember what I said? When you find the normal operating current, the fuse rating should slightly be higher than the current that you have found, but again, not too big. Otherwise, the appliance may work, but when too much current, it may end up damaging your electrical appliance. Okay, let's look at question number 2 there. Question number 2 there says a small radio is rated. So a small radio has got this rating, 160 watts, then 240 volts. So A is simply saying, what does this rating mean? So what does that rating mean? Well, remember, this one here is representing the power, and that one is simply the voltage. Now this power is what we call, that is the power consumption, meaning that for this small radio, the power consumption is that when operated at this voltage. So what this rating means is that the radio, it means, the radio has a power consumption. It has a power consumption. So it has a power consumption of 160 watts when operated at 240 volts. So that's what it simply means. It has a power consumption of 160 watts when operated at 240 volts. So that is what you need to remember. So that's the rating. So any electrical appliances will have a power rating, and you hence, when you know the rating of the appliance, you can determine what type of fuse you can best use or buy in order to replace in case it gets damaged. Let's look at the B part. The B part says what value of the fuse would be suitable for the plug of this radio. So remember, they have given us the power, which is 160 watts. They have given you the voltage, which is 240 volts. I told you, you always find the current. So current, as we know, is equal to power divided by voltage. So current will be equal to, what's the power? It's 160 watts divided by the voltage, 240 volts. So dividing that, 160 divided by 240, that is going to give me to a whole number. That will give me, to rounding it off to a whole number. In this case, it is giving me 0.666 or 0.7. But of course, approximately, if you were to round it off, that will just give you 1 amps. That's the current, we can say. So what's the best fuse rating if you look at these options that we have there? Well, the best fuse rating that I can give is simply 2 amps, because remember I said the fuse rating should slightly be higher than the normal operating current. You cannot use 5. Yes, the radio will work when you use a 5 amp, but remember, when too much current passes through the radio, it may actually get spoiled or get damaged. So the best is simply 2 amps. Now, one last thing that you need to remember, maybe a concept that I need to remind you on, is what you're going to be hearing the word which sometimes we call it as being double insulation. So you're going to be hearing the word double insulation. What exactly is double insulation? Well, double insulation means that an appliance has got two separate layers of insulation. So double insulation is when an appliance, I can say, when an appliance, has two separate, so it has two separate layers of insulation. So when it has got two separate layers of insulation, we call it as being double insulation. Or if you want, you can simply say it is said to be double insulation because the outer case is actually made of plastic rather than metal. So mostly you are going to find that it has got two separate layers of insulation. So the plastic, layer that is outside acts as an extra layer of insulation around the wire. So it has double insulation. It is actually much safer. That is what you need to remember. Well, thank you so much for watching my videos. Watch out for the next topic, which we are calling as being static electricity. So we are going to look at charges that don't move. That's our next topic. That we are going to look at is what we are calling as being static electricity. So we teach you about static charges. Thank you so much for watching.